Welcome back. New Fox News polls this morning. One finds nearly 40% of voters now believe Joe Biden did something illegal when it comes to his son's business deals. 25% say that he did something unethical, while 34% say that he did nothing seriously wrong. 50% of voters now believe Hunter Biden did do something illegal when it comes to foreign business deals. That number's up 13% just from February. Joining me right now is Pennsylvania Congressman Scott Perry. He's chairman of the House Freedom Caucus and a member of the House Oversight Committee. Congressman, good to see you. Thanks very much for being here. You're on the Oversight Committee. You've been seeing and reporting lots of new information. What can you tell us about the Biden family?
Well, look, listen, Maria, first of all, good morning. What I can tell you is probably what maybe some people don't know is there's up to 20 LLCs to run run money through, to launder money through from foreign countries, questionable people from questionable people legally from questionable countries, and then that money distributed to 9 and potentially 11 members of the Biden family. The bank records in one case show that one of the distributions went to Biden. It doesn't say which Biden, which is very odd. I can also tell you that the agencies, certainly the family, have been stonewalling the investigation as much as possible. And so it's been difficult to get all the information. And so we're going to have to take some more extraordinary measures of subpoenas and requests to get the information that we need. Now, Devin Archer came in and essentially corroborated the story of the FBI informant that said that Hunter Biden and Joe Biden received $5 million each to deal with this issue in Ukraine and the prosecutor. And of course, Viktor Shokin was fired, even though even the president of Ukraine at the time said he had done nothing wrong. But he was investigating Hunter Biden, and he was investigating the company Burisma for illicit activity. And coincidentally, as you know, then Vice President Biden said, well, what do you know, son of a B, they fired the prosecutor. And then, of course, Ukraine got the $1 billion in loan guarantees. So that's what we're looking at. It certainly all looks like probable cause, Maria.
Well,
probable cause.
Look, everything you just went through would be bribery. And these are the charges that some of your colleagues have spoken about. If it's bribery, then why is Joe Biden still president? Are you in favor of an impeachment inquiry?
I certainly am. I've been in favor of an inquiry for some time, because what that does is it opens up a different avenue for us, the House of Representatives, to get information. The American people need to know whether their president is crooked or not. That's the bottom line here. And whether it's bribery, in one case it was called extortion. We need to know. There's an election coming. He's the sitting president. Certainly he would want his name cleared, if anybody would, I would think. And so the information ought to be forthcoming. One question that hasn't been answered is what is the $17 to $20 million that we currently know of coming from foreign countries, oligarchs, questionable individuals? What did that money pay for? What were those people paying for? Right. What did they get in return? And Hunter Biden didn't really provide any, he didn't provide anything. So if it was Joe Biden, what did Joe Biden provide? And if it was policy decisions that should be made on behalf of America and the American people that instead were made on behalf of the people that were paying this money, then we've got a problem, whether it's bribery or extortion or just plainly influence peddling and selling America.
Yeah, I mean, look, on day one, Joe Biden walked into the White House in 2021, and one of the first things he did was cancel the China initiative. I know China and the Communist Party of China wanted that to happen. We're wondering if that was a decision he was paid for. What about the decision to sign a memorandum of understanding back in 2013, which allowed thousands of Chinese companies to trade on U.S. exchanges and not follow any auditing rules? Another head scratcher. Why would you allow Chinese companies trading on U.S. exchanges and not follow the same SEC rules that every other American company follows? Kayleigh McGee-White, we've been trying to identify which specific decisions Joe Biden made that he was paid for. We don't know.
Absolutely. And Congressman, your colleague James Comer has made it clear that this is a case he's building that he intends to bring to court. So my question for you is, why was Devin Archer, who is a key witness in this case, why was he not under oath before your committee?
It was the deal that I think was worked out between his lawyers and the people on the oversight committee. And I think that we must understand that this is just probably the first time that we will see Devon Archer. As more information becomes available, he likely will be under oath. Unfortunately, at that time, he might also be serving prison time. But this is a lengthy investigation, as you know. And the other thing that we don't want to do, and I respect Chairman Comer, for this, is we don't want to make accusations unduly and ruin people's lives unnecessarily when we're looking for facts. But when the facts present themselves, we're going to ferret them out and we're going to highlight them and we're going to follow them to their due course. But we have to proceed judiciously. We're not the left here. We don't just accuse people, destroy lives, and then move on to the next target.
Well, let me move on to the next issue here, and that is policy. President Biden is celebrating the Inflation Reduction Act. Yesterday was the one-year anniversary at the White House. He also touted the impact of Bidenomics. Take a listen.
We have a plan that's turning things around. The Inflation Reduction Act is a part of that plan. Bidenomics is just another way of saying restoring the American dream.
Congressman, your reaction, and we should also point out that just the other day, Joe Biden admitted that the Inflation Reduction Act was wrongly named because, in fact, it doesn't really reduce inflation at all. In fact, it's more of a climate change agenda bill.
Yeah, it is the climate change agenda bill. And of course, my constituents, my bosses, and those people all across the country that are struggling to pay their food bill, their mortgage, buy a home, buy a car, when Fitch downgrades America's credit, when the Wall Street Journal and The Hill says that we're spending way too much money on things like destroying the American energy prospect and energy, not only energy dominance, not even energy independence. These are all things that are part and parcel to the so-called Inflation Reduction Act, which have done exactly the opposite and made our economy very perilous, very precarious. And it's difficult for people. The people that I represent are struggling right now financially because of this policy. And if you got to buy electricity, you're paying more. If you got to buy gasoline, if you got to buy diesel fuel, you're paying more. And your choices are being limited. It goes to the banning of the gas stove, but it also goes to your current daily life right now, where your energy bills are higher, and the bills that you pay for every single thing else, whether it's a stuffed toy at Walmart or groceries, are higher because energy is connected to every single one of them.
Yep. All right. We will leave it there. Congressman, good to see you. Thanks very much. Scott Perry joining us this morning.
Good to see you. God bless you.
Pennsylvania. Thank you, sir.